Welcome into All Things Retirement. Ben George with Anthony Aulffo. As we talk about a question I think a lot of couples have is just, hey, how do you get your spouse more involved in planning? Anthony, we're going to open up a mailbag, get a question that came in recently, but I'm sure you see this all the time where couples aren't always on the same page. And I think that's pretty natural, right? There's in most relationships, one person handles the money.
That is pretty common. And then there's other times where one initially maybe doesn't really be involved. And we tried to really encourage them to at least start to show up. But, we typically want to better understand the dynamic there. So it can be a little bit of a process for sure.
Yeah, so we're going to work through that today and kind of help you better understand how the Cardinal Wealth Group approaches their planning with couples and really how can you get your spouse more involved if that's the question. So here, we'll lay it out here. It's just a simple question. I like my wife to be more involved in our retirement planning, but she's always hated talking about money. So are there any suggestions? So somebody comes into you and asks you this, Anthony, where do you start?
Well, you can try to first maybe understand what the root cause is, right? And is it something that there's a reason why they don't like maybe talking about money and maybe get into the root cause, but that could be pretty deep, the anxiety or fear or something to try to unravel that. And especially a new relationship could be pretty difficult, but it doesn't hurt to at least get a better sense if there's some type of history there. So I'd probably start there. And then I would probably say, if that's something that's not totally fixable, what can we do to maybe get them to start to show up?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of where you want them to be, right? Is actually to show up. And maybe that is a big challenge in and of itself, but just kind of getting that first step of just getting them into the office or through that door to that first meeting is a good starting point, right?
It would be. And what I would probably preface a little bit with the spouse, if I was able to, I would say, let's try to keep it low key, a no pressure type of thing where if they can just maybe show up, that would be a great start. Anytime that you maybe, and just in regular relationships, one spouse that's kind of pressing on something usually can backfire. So by maybe changing the dialogue a little bit and saying, I'd love for you to meet the new advisor, and that person can now be the person where the conversation is coming from versus it coming from the other spouse. That's one of those situations where you're kind of changing the dynamic a little bit of the conversation.
Yeah, get kind of a little different approach to how you're talking about it. And I'm curious, like how much do you get into the numbers itself? Because I feel like that's got to be a part that just, if you're not into money, that's something you're going to almost block out immediately. So how do you kind of shift the way you're discussing it?
Yeah. So I would start off with kind of putting the numbers aside and just having a conversation in terms of maybe something that's important to them. It could be maybe, hey, I really just want to make sure that I know where everything's at, or I just want to make sure my kids are fine. Money, pays for things, but the conversation can really be about what the money is for, shifting it to more of a lifestyle or travel, what she finds enjoyment about. And when I say she, it could be he. So I apologize if I start with using he or she there. But just framing it around just topics rather than the numbers, I think can go a long way to just having it more of a conversation to begin with.
Is there anything else differently in terms of how you approach that conversation? Like, do you frame anything else differently besides just, because I think that's a big part of it is, hey, this is what the money's for, not, hey, these are what the returns we're trying to get. These are what, the really specific technical side of it. Is there anything else you changed in your approach to that?
Yeah. So, we definitely eventually want to start talking about maybe the portfolio or tax strategies and stuff like that. But I probably would generally just say, like, obviously there's the intro aspect. There's, where it all goes if something happens to the other spouse. Like, that's a huge one, right? If you have one spouse that's completely not involved in this process at all, and then something happens to the person who handles all the finances, it really leaves that spouse behind the eight ball of figuring out, okay, well, what do I do? So I think one of the biggest wins that we can do is just kind of say, here's where everything's at. If something happens to your spouse, this is what would happen, where you would go, where you can find everything, who to call. And it really puts them in a much stronger position, maybe also allows them to calm down knowing that they're also going to be okay as well, because you can kind of outline how that would work if something happens to the other spouse. Again, it doesn't have to be super number driven. It can just be more big picture. And then also just, again, security for them. And then the other thing would just be like, what are some ways that we can start to get them a little bit involved, showing up once a year or twice a year for a quick 30-minute. They could be Zoom, it can be in the office, and just maybe starting to maybe get a little bit of their opinion of things that might have popped up that are of interest to them. Like, I wanted to take this trip that's super expensive. My spouse doesn't think that we can afford it. And now you start to, have them start to become a part of that conversation. That's really the goal, is to just have them become the conversation. And what we're talking about here is having somebody that's like maybe not involved at all. That's not always the case. Sometimes they show up, they're just a little bit more quiet, a little bit more reserved, don't do much of the talking, but don't mind showing up. And they do have an opinion, and you just have to ask and be more inclusive.
Yeah, I like that. So you got to just kind of two parts: understanding where everything is, how everything works, but also kind of having a voice and a role in that. And speaking of roles, I mean, how involved? I know if somebody really isn't into money, can you get them involved beyond just, hey, what are some of the things you want to do with the money? Is there anything else you can do to get them more involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are just some of the basic questions in terms of like, is there anything that is on the top of your mind that you really wanted to do in the future or the near term at the house? Something for the kids, something for the grandkids, anything in mind like that, just very general, just asking some questions. And your posture towards them as the advisor goes a long way to, be inclusive, to look at them, to be inclusive and not just talk to the one that's really been the only one that's been involved with that process. And I mean, we've come across this a lot, and you'd be surprised over the gains that you get in a year or two, where they're actually become more motivated, come to the meeting with notes, with a question. And that's how you start to recognize that they have really become more involved over time. So it's generally not one of those things that's, going to happen overnight. They do need to chip away at it. And the dynamic for, one spouse, I know this mailbag question was really, how do I get my spouse involved? Can be pretty tough if it's just the one. The perfect example, my daughter Rosa, we just taught her how to ride a bike. I failed at that, trying to get her to ride a bike because she was really nervous about falling, even though I'm, right beside her the whole time. We hired the bike whisperer in town, and he was able to teach her how to ride a bike in 2 1-hour sessions. And so sometimes just having that other party that's the intermediary can go a long ways to kind of bridging that gap between two spouses.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. I think that's important to understand, is that, hey, even if you want to get them involved right away, it might take some time. I'm curious, though, at the Cardinal Wealth Group, when you're meeting with someone, do you ever have first meetings with just one spouse, or do you always try to have both parties involved right from the start?
We encourage it, but we don't make that a requirement. We just had somebody 2 weeks ago where the one spouse was very into all the finances, and you could tell that right out of the gates. And she said that, my other spouse is more of a creative mind. Money discussions is kind of overwhelming to him. I said, look, let's just do a lot of the heavy lifting together to get started with the first few meetings, let's get all your financial data together. Let's get our arms around some of the goals and concerns as you see it. But I would love for the other spouse to come in at some point so that we can at least just start an initial engagement. It could just be a phone call, could be Zoom if they don't want to come in right away. And that's just us trying to chip away at that common, it's super common situation where we can hopefully coach them up over time.
Yeah. Well, if you want to begin your Cardinal success journey, you can get a free assessment. Just visit the link down in the show description, cardinalwg.com, and sit down. Go visit with Anthony and the team there. Just learn more about the process and also give them a chance to better understand your situation and whether or not you're a good fit to work with them. But again, if one spouse is not that involved, there is a process to help get there, but it may not be easy, but there is a way to have them a part of the process, which is very important over the long term. And I think that is the ideal outcome. So hopefully this video helps you kind of understand how Anthony and the team helps their clients get there and what you can do to better position yourself and your spouse. But if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. We appreciate that support. Anthony, enjoyed it as always. Look forward to talking to you again here on All Things Retirement.
Information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Please consult a qualified professional before taking any action.